Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sake Revolution. This is America's first sake podcast, and I'm one of your hosts. My name is John Puma from the Sake Notes, and I'm the guy who created the Internet Sake Discord.
And I'm your host, Timothy Sullivan. I'm a sake samurai, sake educator, as well as the founder of the Urban Sake website. And every week, John and I will be here tasting and chatting about all things sake, and doing our best to make it fun and easy to understand. Hey, John, how you doing?
Hello there. How are you?
I'm ready for some sake. It's been a long weekend.
It has. So let's jump right into things. Today we're doing another one in one of our most fun series, I think. This is Branded, where we talk about sake brands.
Yep, we're going to focus in on one brand of sake, dive a little bit into their story, and try some of their sake. So I love these brand-specific episodes that we do. And this is from a region that is near and dear to my heart.
Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about Kamonishiki.
Yes, Kamonishiki. And they are from Niigata Prefecture.
Yes. Yeah, they're very much from Niigata Prefecture, but I want to say not your grandmother's Niigata Prefecture sake.
Why do you say that?
Well, I think that Niigata is very much known for reserved, sometimes rice-driven, and very dry, crisp-finished sake.
That's
true. And I think that the reputation that Kamonishiki has is very much not that exact thing.
Well, we're going to put that to the test in a minute in the glass. So I'm looking forward to that.
We're going to put it in the glass and test it there. Excellent. So yeah, this is another one of those cult brands and those boutique brands that kind of came out of nowhere and took Japan kind of by storm in a relatively short span of time. I remember seeing it a little bit and then seeing it a lot all of a sudden. And one of those situations where you go to a place and you see it in the window and you ask about it, and they're always like, oh, we don't have that. We just put that in the window because we once had that, up there with your Giundais and your G-Cons. And much like your G-Cons, now it is available in the States. Now, this one, you might have seen this bottle if you've been to Japan or if you've seen a lot of like social media or a lot of sake stuff. This one, the label is very distinct because it is a tag.
A tag.
It's a tag.
It's like a hang tag, right?
Yeah. And it's just like a big tag with all the information on it. And it actually even has string on it. And it's just pressed against the bottle. And there's a sticker that keeps it in place. And it's just a tag.
Yeah, it's like one of those old-timey manila hang tags.
Yes.
It's about 4 inches long by 3 inches wide, so it's pretty big. But that hang tag replaces the label, and it has the hole in it and the string hanging off of it. So it's a very interesting label, very cool. And if you want to see a picture, of course, just go to sakerevolution.com for our show notes. We'll have some photos of these really cool labels. And I can't wait to dig into all the information on this hang tag label. But you're right, that is like the defining characteristic for this bottle, the really unique label.
Very much so. There's no missing, like, you're not going to mistake this for a different sake.
Yeah.
Not until somebody makes a copycat hang tag. And it becomes the thing, and everybody starts doing tags on their bottles. Tim, what do we know about our friends at Kamonishiki?
Well, Kamonishiki, as we said, is located in Niigata. And Niigata is a prefecture on the main island of Japan, on the Sea of Japan side. And if it's shaped kind of like a crescent itself, this brewery is located in Kamo City, which is right in the middle of the prefecture. It's almost like the geographical center of the prefecture. And it was founded in 1893.
Okay.
And we have another story of a young son of the brewery coming home and revitalizing. So the current president is very young. His name is Yuichi Tanaka. And he took over directing this brewery at age of 24.
24.
Yeah, and since then,
I think I was unemployed at 24. Tim. I don't know what you were doing.
I don't. Who remembers? So he took over the brewery at age 24, and I think that coincides with what you were talking about as the emergence of this Kamonishiki brand as kind of a cult brand, or as a new, let's refer to it as like new wave sake. Like there's been this wave of sake coming forward that has a different tone to it, a different level of vibrancy and fruit and texture. And I think that he's definitely part of these younger new wave brewers that are making a splash.
Yeah, and it's that familiar story. Young person comes in and they completely change it all. They're always really young.
We were young once too.
I know.
I did not save a brewery when I was 24, but
No.
This brand is called Nifudazake. So the brewery produces a few different brands, but this one with the hang tag label on it, this brand is called Nifudazake. So we talked about how Tanaka-san is young and changing things up at the brewery and coming out with these new vibrant brands, part of this new wave of younger brewers. And I read on the importer's website that he's also very innovative when it comes to the engineering of sake brewing. For example, he's customized systems for washing the rice, and he's created light up illuminated tables that help him inspect the koji while they're growing the koji mold onto the rice.
So he's pretty hands-on then.
Absolutely. And it looks like they're attacking this with a real sense of innovation, not only about the flavor, but also the production method too. So I think that's really, really cool.
Nice. I like that.
Yeah. So now let's dig into this label, this hang tag label, which is so cool.
Yeah, let's.
Yeah.
So what's the first thing that jumps out at you when you look at it, apart from the fact that it's a hang tag?
Well, it's the hang tag with the string on it. But on the far left, it says "For USA" in big letters.
Isn't that great?
Yes. So this was made for export and made for USA. It says it right on the label.
Yeah.
And I know I was looking online, and I know I saw another one that said "For Singapore."
Oh, really? Wow.
Yes. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
And what's the next thing that jumps out at you, John?
Next thing that jumps out at me is that they actually have, and this is like a geeky thing, I think, they put like the batch number on here.
Yes.
Or the tank number in this case. And it's, 132 and it's circled, and the tag has, they have a bunch of different tank numbers on it, and you actually know the tank it came from, which is, I don't know, that's something cool. I kind of think that's awesome.
That's really cool. And not usual, not common at all that you would know which tank. This label actually says tank number, and as you said, 132 is circled. But also on here, there's a pre-printed 164, 166, 172, 183. So they kind of mapped out all the tanks probably for the season, and whatever they're bottling, they're going to circle that tank. So that's really cool too.
Yeah. A lot of brewers have been doing this more recently, I think, but the brewing year is actually printed on here as well as part of the tag, which is nice. So this is the BY21.
Yeah. And BY stands for brewing year.
Yeah.
And then the milling rate is literally front and center, right? 50%.
It is literally
milling.
the most center thing on this label.
Yeah. And then on the right-hand side of the label, it says Junmai Daiginjo in Japanese.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting hang tag label and really cool design. Very eye-catching, very distinctive.
Very much so. The one that's a little weird is that the company logo, or the brand logo, is actually a really tiny graphic in the upper right-hand corner. And it's like, blink and you miss it.
Yeah.
That's really unusual. It's an interesting decision, but I think that they probably feel this tag is distinctive enough that they can put that logo wherever they want, and people are going to know what they're getting their hands on.
Yep, they've got the logo on the upper right of the tag, as you said, but it's also on the very top of the cap as well. So if you look at the top of the cap, the logo's up there.
Very cool.
Kamonishiki. And the logo is a little mountain as well, with like a trail coming down from the mountain. And that's so fitting for Niigata because Niigata is so famous for being a mountainous region with all the snow. So I think that's a really cool logo that they created.
Yeah, very cool. I like it.
All right. Well, John, I can't wait any longer. Let's get behind this Manila hang tag label and taste this sake.
Because you insist.
I do. So do you want to give us the stats that we have for this?
I would love to. So this sake is made from a combination of Yamana Nishiki and Gohyakuman Goku, both milled to 50%. The alcohol by volume, a little bit on the lighter side compared to some of the things we've been drinking recently on the show at 15%. Sake meter value is +5, so a touch on the dry side. Tim, as you mentioned earlier from the label, this is a Junmai Daiginjo, and the sub-brand here is Nifudazake, and the acidity is 1.3. I should mention also that from that Yamanashiki and Gohyakuman Goku, as is a thing that happens occasionally, the Yamanashiki is the koji rice, and the Gohyakuman Goku is providing the starch element. That is the kakamai, but both of them are 50% though.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Yeah.
Good.
Let's open it up.
All right. So it's time for ASMR. If you enjoy this part, turn up your volume. If you don't, turn down your volume.
All right. We've got it in the glass.
Yeah. Okay, so as a self-proclaimed expert in Niigata sake, which I'm not, but as a huge Niigata sake fan, normally those sakes are more aggressively charcoal filtered, and you get this really crystal clear water-like appearance in the glass. And this has a noticeable hue to it, doesn't it?
A tiny bit, yes.
Yeah, there's a little hint of color. And let's give it a smell.
This is a bit on the reserved side.
Yeah. It's not super outgoing aromatically, but to me it smells a little peachy, like a little bit of peach, maybe a little bit of pear.
I'm getting a little bit of grape, like the green grape, not like grape flavor, but what an actual grape smells like.
But it's definitely fruity.
But it's not
Yeah.
overwhelming. It's very subtly fruity.
Yeah. Let's give it a taste.
Yes, let's.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Do you feel a little prickling on your tongue?
There is a bit of that. There is definitely some action still going here.
Some action.
Action.
So it's not a carbonated sake by any stretch, but it felt like having a freshly opened bottle. It felt like a little prickling, a little effervescence on the tongue, just a hint of that, but almost as a sign of how fresh and lively the sake is.
Yeah. Definitely the first thing I noticed as well was like, wow, hold on, this is still a little bit active.
Yeah. Two things hit me right away with this sake. One is the texture has a richness and a weight to it. It's only 15% alcohol. It's not boozy at all, but there's a coating aspect to this. There's a richness to it that it's not light, clean, and crisp like most Niigata sakes, as you said at the start of the show. It's got a little bit of richness. Do you pick up on that as well?
I do. This is a little bit more on the aggressive side, flavor wise, especially with how reserved the nose was. It kind of takes you by surprise.
Yeah.
It's not overwhelming. It's not like, I think we've definitely tasted things that were a lot more big up front, but there is an interesting amount of depth here.
Yeah. And for me, the flavors, again, there's like peachy flavors and plum. I'm getting a lot of plum flavors, that silky, kind of richer texture, and a soft, round finish. And it does linger a bit.
It does. This is a joy to sip on.
Okay.
So
we have the thumbs up from JP.
for sipping, definitely. This is fantastic. It's such a nice, relaxing sake. But there's a lot going on. It's not a boring, relaxing sake. I've had people comment that the sake that I might like sipping can be sometimes described as dull.
Impossible.
I know. No, this is definitely not dull. It is a lot of fun to sip on, actually. I am getting that peach that you described. A little less of the plum, but I honestly have not had a plum in many years.
Well, now that you're tasting sake on the interwebs, you have to eat all the fruits out there.
I can have more fruits.
Yes. So next time I say star fruit, I want you to know what I'm talking about.
I'm on it. I got homework. Yeah, this is remarkably well balanced for all the different, how interesting the texture is, how interesting that little, that bit of fun on the mouthfeel when you first sip on it. The fruit not just being your run-of-the-mill tropical fruit, that light, smooth finish, that little bit of a linger, really all goes really well together. That's what I'm loving about this. The journey of the sip is exciting for me.
Yeah. Two things I want to talk about. One is how this sake probably plays out in a modern Japanese sake bar, higher end sake bar, and also how it differs from classic Niigata sake, because I think that's a really interesting thing. So
yes.
One of the reasons that after tasting this now for kind of the first time, I feel like I can understand why this might be veering towards a cult status style sake. It's got the story of the young son coming back with innovation and engineering prowess to create a new style and break away from tradition a little bit. And if you can imagine sitting in a high-end sake bar in Japan, sipping this out of a beautiful crystal wine glass, I can see people having that experience of like, oh my gosh, this is really different.
Yes.
And
it is different.
Yeah.
That's a really good way of putting it.
Yeah. And
speaking of different,
yes.
How does this compare to you have tasted, I would imagine, many orders of magnitude more Niigata sakes than I have.
Yeah. And I was lucky enough to live in Niigata for a year, so I got to taste a lot of sakes at the source at different breweries around the prefecture. And one thing that is very true, even though it's not universal in Niigata, but it's very true that there is this regional style that's been cultivated over the years, which is tanrei karakuchi. Karakuchi means dry, right?
Yes.
And tanrei means kind of clean or beautiful. And it's often translated as like crisp, clean, and dry as the overarching regional style for Niigata. And one way that they achieve that style is by charcoal filtering thoroughly and creating a visual in the glass that matches that crisp, clean style. And I think that that's one of the things that's been skipped over here is that treatment of the sake after fermentation as well. You know, how they make it super crystal clear traditionally. And this one has just a hint of color to it. It has that richer texture versus that crisp, bright, drier texture. This has a little bit more coating, a little bit more richness, and yeah, really interesting. So this breaks away from the Niigata mold very distinctly.
Yeah. When I first found out that this was actually from Niigata, I was quite surprised because it really has more in common with those modern sakes, those modern cult sakes that we've been talking about so much. I mean, those are geographically diverse too. Like when Jikon's over in Mie, Jiondai's over in Yamagata, and then this one over here in Niigata, they're kind of going, I don't say they're going against style necessarily, but they're not being beholden to it, and they're breaking out and just doing their own thing.
Right. You know, I took a look at the Kamonishiki Sake Brewery Instagram page. And it is, I would say, 80% of the photos on their Instagram are photos of these hang tag labels on a black background. And they're just announcing each release. So another thing that's interesting here is that these are almost like micro releases. So the labels, I think one of the reasons they chose this hang tag label that just gets suspended on the bottle versus something glued on is that they are doing such a fine-grained production method, highlighting each tank, like not a brewing season. Like this is our 2021 Junmai Daiginjo. They have like 14, 15 different tanks that they highlight. They release some of them as unpasteurized, some of them as Shibori Tate. This, the one we have, is a special release for the USA.
And I love that they just throw that on the bottle. That's great.
And some that are pasteurized, some milled to 40%, some milled to 50%. And each of these has a different tank number circled. And if you get into sake geekery and you want to follow a brewery, this is like collect them all trading cards in my book, you know?
So you're saying this is like sake nerd catnip, like this brand, and they're doing all the things to get the sake nerds really excited. I'm all right with that, by the way. And as a sake nerd, I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. I wish we can get more of that going on.
Yeah, like if you could say, oh, I had the tank 183, 40% milled from BY20, and I prefer that just a bit to the 50% milled BY21 from tank 166. It's like, oh my God. I think it's so cool. This is like right up my alley.
This is that would be too much for me, I don't think.
But it's really such an interesting way to approach this. It is the opposite of a mass market approach to producing sake, microbrewed, attention to detail, and all the different rices can be highlighted on this label, all the different fermentation productions and all the different finishing methods and all the different tanks that they have to choose from. So just really, really fun, really interesting. And it's so cool that we have a version of this in the US for us to enjoy here.
Yeah. And I really like that it's, specifically outlined in that way, because it makes me wonder, like, did they do some kind of research? They'd speak to the importer and be like, hey, what's popular over there? And then try to do that? Or do they have something that they were like a vision that was like, no, we want to do this for the US. We think they're going to like that. That just seems really interesting to me because they're so hyper specific about what they're doing. It seems exciting that to know what they chose. And then it makes me want to know what else they chose for the other regions. You pointed out that there's one for Singapore. I want to taste that one and see how it compares to the one from the US. Like, is there one for Canada? We can probably find a way to get that if we tried really hard. That would be fun. And just to see what they changed for each region and see if there's a regionality to the destination to it. It's fun. It's interesting.
Yeah. Well, given that they make so many versions of all these different sakes and they highlight the different tanks, I would imagine they have a lot to choose from for shipping to different locations.
Yeah. I love it. Really, really good stuff. I'm glad it's here. And I think that these guys got really popular just a few short years ago and they're here already. So that's great. It's good news.
Okay. Well, this is a great sake, like you said. Really delicious. Any thoughts on food pairing before we wrap up?
Maybe you should lead with the food pairing. This is very... I feel like there's a house of cards with this sake because every bit is so important to the experience.
Yeah,
this is a sipping sake for John.
Yeah, definitely. This gets a lot from being in a wine glass, and I think it gets a lot from being the right temperature. Like, I think this should be served chilled for sure. In my book.
Yes, I will say that it's been in our glass here for probably about 15, 20 minutes now. And that aroma is a little bit less subtle at this point for me. And I don't know if it's just a matter of it warming up a couple of degrees. It's still quite chilled, but just a tad less. And definitely getting a little bit more aroma. Flavor is still, the flavor journey is still right on time, but really, really wonderful stuff.
Yeah.
And it's, like all of these culty sakes, I get it. I understand why people are excited to have this.
So for food pairing for me, I often get cravings for one particular dish that's in my head.
Yeah.
And this one, I'm craving, I mentioned plum before, and that's been circling in my mind. And there's one savory dish that I love that has plum in it, and that is sasami yakitori, which is like the breast meat yakitori with a little dab of the salted plum on it.
Yeah.
And it gives you this salty, umami, yummy, delicious bite of chicken. And I think that would have just that hint of that plum flavor, a little bit of salt, and the smokiness from the yakitori. And this has the rich body to stand up to that. And a little hint of plum for me, and peach and plum on there, I think would marry very beautifully with that. So that's kind of what popped into my mind for pairing with this.
Ooh, that does sound nice. I have not had that style of yakitori in a very long time.
Yeah. It's one of my favorites, and you can't overdo it. You just get this little dollop of the umeboshi plum on there, pickled plum on there, and it is so good. Such a nice contrasting, salty, fruity flavor to the umami and the chicken and the charcoal smoke. It's really, really good. So I think that would go great with this.
I usually get mine with the wasabi dollops instead.
Ooh, yeah, those are
but
good.
But the plum dollops are also very good.
Yes. And
are we hungry yet, Tim? Are we hungry?
I'm getting hungry. Sometimes they layer a little bit of shiso leaf on there.
Ooh, I don't think I've
chicken
ever had
meat
it like
with
that.
Shiso leaf and then the dollop. So it can get really, really good. That's
all right. Do you know any place in New York that does that? We're going.
Okay, we're going. I'll meet you there. All right.
Excellent. Great.
Cool. Well, John, great to taste with you. This was really fun to talk about a new brewery. And like we said, the labels indicate all the different variations for the different tanks, different milling rates, different rices. So when we get back to Japan, we have to look this sake up and try some of the other labels that may not be here in the States, but we are going to try those when we get to Japan and contrast and compare and get our sake geek on with those those tank numbers, right?
Yeah. And every time I ever encounter this sake, I'm going to be looking at those tank numbers now and trying to get those details. I'm going to take some photos. We can go over it later. It'll be great.
Yeah, you'd be like, tank 132. That's so 2022. All right. Awesome. Well, I want to thank all of our listeners today for tuning in. Thanks so much. And a special hi and hello to all of our patrons. If you'd like to support Sake Revolution, one great way to support us is to join our community on Patreon. To learn more, visit patreon.com/sakerevolution.
And did you know there's other ways to support this podcast? You can also review our show at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, any of that stuff. And it really does get the word out about the show. It also helps the algorithm find us. So when you're looking for stuff and it's like, oh, other things that are like this, you want them to point at Sake Revolution. So until next time, please grab a glass. Remember to keep drinking sake and kanpai.